Welcome back to Inside the Locker Room, part of the Clinical Champions series, where we sit down with experienced thought leaders to discuss clinical realities and the small details that can make a meaningful impact in practice. In today's episode, Dr. Barry Goldenberg, a prosthodontist based out of St. Louis, Missouri, explores why not all conical connections are created equal, and the critical design characteristics that contribute to long-term implant stability and bone preservation. Let's get into it.
Imagining the rates of peri-implantitis at the rates that we do, which maybe read some articles as high as 20%. Very high. So what we need to do is we need to look at everything on the implant that's in contact with the bone and with the tissue to see what's going on. So basically the implant abutment complex with the crown, there are three interfaces here. The first is the implant to bone, the second is the abutment to the crown, and the third, the most important, is the implant abutment junction. This implant abutment junction is a part that we're going to analyze a little bit more because this is called the microgap. So if you ever hear the term microgap, what that means is not a visible gap, it's the implant abutment junction in a static situation. There's no movement. So this is the difference between microgap and everything else that we're talking about. So when we were talking about all the other things and thinking like an experienced clinician, that's on a grand scale of things that we're doing. The failures tend to come, when I said before, from a break in the chain, maybe something, the smallest part of that's going to be the microgap. That little area over there could just ruin everything for us. So let's examine that a little bit more. So a number of years ago, Holger Zipprich, Paul Weigel, who was the head prosthodontist at the University of Frankfurt, did studies on the microgap and micromovement. So what is a micromovement? Is that the implant moving in a bone? No, that's a misconception. That's micromotion. We have our microgap, which is the implant abutment junction, that little gap. Micromovement is that if that gap opens up. But how can it open up? Because this is the implant abutment junction here. This is a microgap. We've torqued everything down to whatever the prescribed torque should be for that particular implant. It can't open. What do you mean it opens? So what they did years and years ago, and still considered classic studies, they did high-speed video of this area over here on all different implant systems, where they took a point 7 millimeters superior to the microgap with a 30-degree off-axis load attainable in the mouth, just to see what happens with that microgap. If it opens, that's micromovement. So it doesn't matter what these implants are. That's not the important thing. Just take a look at the gap here and here. Static, it's closed. Under function, look how it opens. That's called micromovement. Static, it's microgap. That's called micromovement. What is the big deal about micromovement? Well, that implant abutment junction, that microgap, is generally at the crest of the bone. That's where the implants are placed. You have bacteria that's being sucked into that implant system, and as it's closing, it's being pushed right out. Sucked in, pushed out. That pumping theory to the crest of the bone is what's going to cause that bacteria to win, and then it's going to cause the bone loss. That's what happens. There's marginal strain in the bone. We have microgaps and we have micro movement. How does this affect us? Well, this is what happens. These two bottom ones are not mine, but those top three are mine in my practice from a number of years ago. You start seeing resorption of the soft tissue in the aesthetic zone. Maybe in the posterior, it's not a bad thing, but in the aesthetic zone up here, it certainly could be detrimental to the aesthetics here. Here, these were given to me by a friend of mine who is a periodontist, and the dentist just started watching this, and all of a sudden there was bacteria here, and then it turns into peri-implantitis, and now it's a failure. So that's what happened, all because of this little area here, the microgap. So there was an article that was published last year, talked about a solution to tissue instability called the PROS concept, predictable planning. And here's the interesting thing. This article had nothing to do with any implant system. It's just as if he had a wish of what would be the ideal solution to prevent any sort of instability. The PROS concept, what does that mean? P-R-O-S. Well, P stands for platform switching, R stands for restorative abutment design, O stands for the optimal connection, and S stands for subcrestal placement. If you have these things going for you with an implant system, this is a solution to tissue instability. So let's concentrate on the connection. The optimal connection that they're talking about in this article is the conical connection, a Morse taper connection. And basically, when you take a look at this Morse taper connection, when you take a look at the biotech implant, actually, this is a schematic of theirs, this Morse taper connection is really important because this Morse taper connection is a gap-free connection. You go down the whole side from the abutment to the inside of the implant, there is no gap whatsoever. When you take a look at a cross-sectional view of this connection on different levels of it, this is a screw over here. But when you take a look at cut number 7, cut number 12, you really don't see a distinction or a demarcation between the abutment and the implant. You certainly don't see it on this. It's almost invisible. It's acting like a one-piece implant, and one-piece implants have no microgap. One-piece implants show better tissue stability than two-piece implants. So now we have the advantage of having a two-piece implant that's acting like a one-piece implant with this conical connection, but I said that's only part of it. It's the whole thing. Gap-free is really the key because there are other manufacturers that will say, well, we have a conical connection too. But you take a look at the conical connection may be just up there, and there's a gap beyond that. So they could say a conical connection, but it's not really.